25,000 Mongol horsemen cross a dark river at midnight. On the other side, 70,000 Hungarians sleep behind wagons in a camp so crowded, men can barely turn. By dawn, the ground runs red. This is not legend. This is the 11th of April, 1241. Near a village called Mohi, on the banks of the Sajó River in eastern Hungary. You think you know how medieval battles work. Knights charge, swords clash, the bigger army wins. Mohi breaks every rule. Stone-throwing machines used like artillery. A night bridge built in secret. An escape route that becomes a killing ground, and when the sun sets, one of Europe's finest armies is gone. The Mongols have conquered more land than anyone in history. 65 pitched battles won under their greatest general, a man named Subutai. He is 65 years old when he reaches Hungary, too fat to ride a horse, carried to battle in an ox cart, and he is about to orchestrate the perfect double envelopment while Europe watches, frozen. If you value documented medieval warfare and military strategy like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Encirclement Notiz, a contemporary German chronicle from 1241 that records Hungarian losses, and the Carmen Miserabile by Roger of Torre Maggiore, who survived the invasion as a captive and wrote his eyewitness account in 1243. These are not secondary histories. These are men who saw the bodies. Now back to the information. 1237, a Dominican friar named Julianus brings a letter to King Béla IV of Hungary. It is from Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, commander of the Mongol Golden Horde. The message is simple: surrender your kingdom or we come for you. Béla does not reply. 1239, 40,000 Cuman warriors arrive at Hungary's border. They are fleeing the Mongols, nomads from the steppe, expert horsemen experienced in Mongol tactics. Béla offers them asylum. In return, their Khan Khotin converts to Christianity. Béla now styles himself king of Cumania. The Mongols consider the Cumans their slaves. This acceptance becomes the pretext for invasion. 1241, March. The Mongols attack Hungary with 3 armies. A northern force under Kaidu moves through Poland to prevent reinforcements. They smash Duke Henry II of Silesia at Legnica on the 9th of April. 9 Saxaviers collected from the dead. A southern force under Kadan strikes Transylvania, crushes the voivode's army. The main army, led by Batu Khan and Subutai, drives through the fortified Vereka Pass. On the 12th of March, they annihilate the force of Denis Tomaj, the Count Palatine. Hungary's eastern defenses collapse in 3 days. Béla had personally supervised the construction of natural barriers along the border, dense obstacles meant to slow any invasion. The Mongols have specialized engineering units. They clear the paths in 72 hours. Béla calls his nobles to Pest. The capital sits on the west bank of the Danube. He orders full mobilization. The Cumans are there. So is Frederick II, Duke of Austria. 40,000 Cuman fighters, tens of thousands of Hungarian knights, crossbowmen, infantry, the largest army Béla has ever assembled. Then the riots begin. Hungarians hate the Cumans, hate that their king favors these nomads. Rumors spread. Some say the Cumans are Mongol spies. Some say Duke Frederick spreads the rumors himself. Khotin, the Cuman Khan, is under Béla's personal protection. A mob murders him in the streets of Pest. The Cumans explode, betrayed. They ride south, pillaging everything. Thousands of Hungarians die at Cuman hands. Béla loses 40,000 experienced steppe fighters overnight. The one force in Europe that knows how to fight Mongols? Gone. Mobilization falls apart. Many nobles refuse to come. They hate Béla. They want him to fail. Some contingents are destroyed by Mongols before they reach Pest. Some are destroyed by renegade Cumans. Archbishop Ugrin of Kalaksa tries to attack a Mongol unit. He is lured into a swamp. His armored cavalry becomes stuck, slaughtered. Duke Frederick defeats a minor Mongol raiding party near Pest. He calls Béla a coward for not charging immediately. Then Frederick goes home, abandoning Hungary. Béla is left with perhaps 60,000 men. The closest hard evidence comes from the Encirclement Notiz, which reports 10,000 Hungarian dead, suggesting the full army was around that size. Though other estimates range up to 60 or 70,000, the Mongols have maybe 25 to 30,000 for the main force, part of a total 40,000 horsemen across all 3 invasion armies according to Rashid al-Din, drawing on Mongol sources. The Mongol vanguard reaches Pest on the 15th of March. They pillage the outskirts. Béla forbids his men to attack. The army is not ready. His nobles call him a coward again. Late March. Béla finally decides to march east. He will meet the Mongols head-on. Stop them before they reach the heartland. The Hungarian army moves through the Hernad River Valley. Heavy cavalry, light cavalry, crossbowmen, infantry with spears and axes wagons full of supplies. The Mongols retreat, a week of forced marches. The Hungarians chase them. The nobles are convinced now. The Mongols are just raiders, cowards running from real soldiers. Béla is vindicated, or so it seems. 10th of April, 1241. The Hungarians reach the Sajó River near the village of Mohi. The river is flooded, spring melt, fast current. There's a stone bridge. Béla orders his army to camp on the west bank, just south of the bridge. They set up behind a circular laager of wagons. The camp is too small. Béla's advisors have miscalculated. Tents are squeezed together, no space between them, men and horses packed tight. Movement is difficult in daylight, nearly impossible at night. Across the river, in the woods on the east bank, Batu Khan and Subutai watch. Batu climbs a hill. He prays and meditates for a day and a night. Then he surveys the Hungarian camp. When he sees how cramped it is, he says the Hungarians are crowded together like a herd of cattle in narrow stalls, with no room to move about. A Ruthenian slave escapes from the Mongol camp. He reaches the Hungarians with a warning. The Mongols plan a night attack across the bridge. The Hungarians do not believe it will be a full assault, but Prince Koloman, Béla's younger brother, and Archbishop Ogrin Chak, along with Rimbal de Vauxhall, master of the Knights Templar, take troops and leave camp. They march 7 kilometers in darkness. They reach the bridge at midnight. The sun had set at 1829. They have been marching in total darkness. When they arrive, some Mongol forces have already begun crossing. The Hungarians charge. A fierce fight erupts on the bridge. The Hungarians drive the Mongols back. Many Mongols are killed. Others are forced off the bridge, drowning in the flooded Sajó. Thomas of Split, interviewing eyewitnesses later, records this initial Hungarian victory. The Hungarians hold the bridge through the night. Small numbers stay on guard. The rest return to camp to celebrate. They believe they have won. Dawn, 11th of April, 1241. The Mongols attack again. This time, 7 stone-throwing catapults are brought forward. Massive siege engines. Subutai has learned from Chinese military engineers. These machines hurl rocks across the river. They clear the bridge guards with a rolling barrage. The Hungarian crossbowmen are driven back by the bombardment. This is the first recorded use in the West of siege artillery in field battle. Not for walls, for soldiers. Behind this barrage, Batu's cavalry charges the bridge. The Hungarians rush out from camp to defend. Koloman and Ugrin lead them. But something is wrong. Mongol numbers keep growing. This is not a minor raid. This is the main force. Koloman and Ugrin realize too late. They send word back to camp. Wake the king. Prepare for battle. But Béla has not even issued orders. Archbishop Ugrin reproaches the king publicly. Finally, the Hungarian army sallies forth. The delay has given Batu time to finish crossing. The battle begins in earnest. The Hungarians outnumber Batu's detachment. They press the attack. The Mongols have the river at their backs. They cannot maneuver freely. Batu loses 30 of his Batars, his personal bodyguards. One of his lieutenants, Bakatu, is killed. Batu himself leads a charge into a Hungarian strongpoint. Chinese and Mongol sources report Batu's forces are stretched thin, on the edge of breaking. Then Subutai arrives from the south. During the night, while Batu's forces fought at the bridge, Subutai had taken 30,000 men downriver. The Sajó was too deep to ford. Engineers built a pontoon bridge in secret, deeper water than expected. Construction took longer, but by 9 in the morning, Subutai's entire force had crossed. The Hungarians focused on the bridge fight. They did not expect a crossing elsewhere. The Sajó was supposed to be too deep. Now Subutai hits them from the south and rear. Panic. The Hungarians try to retreat to their fortified camp. Subutai pursues. The Mongols surround the camp. Arrows rain down. The Hungarians are packed so tightly they cannot maneuver. Shields up, but there is nowhere to move. The Mongols use burning naphtha. Thomas of Split records that the Hungarians were devastated by Mongol arrows, stones, and burning naphtha. Batu suggests a withdrawal. His losses are unusually high. The Hungarian crossbowmen and Templar knights have fought hard. Mongol dead pile up. But Subutai sees the situation clearly. The Hungarians are trapped. He exhorts Batu, keep attacking. Subutai does something brilliant. He opens a gap in the Mongol encirclement, a clear path west, an escape route. The Hungarians see it. Hope. They can break out, run to Pest, regroup. King Béla flees first. When the Mongols make no move to stop him, the rest of the army drops their weapons and rushes through the gap. Exactly what Subutai wanted. The gap leads to a swamp, poor footing for horses, hard terrain for infantry. Once the Hungarian army is strung out, fleeing in disorder, the Mongol cavalry attacks. The killing begins. Thomas of Split describes what happens next. when the Mongols saw their enemies were exhausted from running and unable to stretch out their arms to fight or their legs in flight, they began to rain spears upon them from all sides and to cut them down with swords, sparing no one and butchering them like animals. Left and right they fell like leaves in winter. The whole way was covered with their wretched bodies. Blood flowed like the stream of a river. The route the Hungarians flee along becomes so choked with corpses that the ground turns red. Thomas of Split, interviewing survivors, learns this from men who walk the road. The Epternacher Notiz, written by a German chronicler close to the events, reports 10,000 Hungarian soldiers killed, almost the entire army. Thomas of Split and other sources report much higher numbers, 60,000, 65,000. Modern historians note the estimates vary widely, but all agree the Hungarian force was virtually annihilated. Archbishop Ogrin dies in the fighting. Koloman, Béla's brother, is wounded so badly he dies days later. 3 bishops fall, countless nobles. The Hungarian military and political leadership is gutted. Béla escapes. His personal bodyguard fights heroically to cover his retreat. Batu had ordered Béla captured alive. That order probably saves the king's life. Béla rides north toward Posoni, today called Bratislava. The Mongols pursue. Béla flees into Austria, seeking protection from Duke Frederick. Frederick arrests him. One chronicler writes that Béla was like the fish trying to avoid being fried in the pan that jumps into the embers and gets roasted. In order to avoid the bad, he came to worse. Frederick extorts Béla, forces him to sign over 3 western counties, takes all of Béla's remaining treasury, then releases him. Béla flees again, southwest through Hungarian territory to the Adriatic coast. He reaches the castle of Trogir in Dalmatia. There he stays, out of Mongol reach, for months. Meanwhile, Batu's forces find the royal seal on Béla's dead vice-chancellor's body. Mongol commanders force captured Hungarian clerks to write a fake royal proclamation. It reads, "Do not fear the ferocity and madness of the hounds, and do not dare to leave your houses, because although on account of some unforeseen circumstances we had to leave behind the camp and our tents, yet by the favor of God we intend gradually to recover them and fight a valiant battle against the Mongols. Therefore, do not think, except pray that merciful God may permit us to crush the heads of our enemies. The fake letter bears the real royal seal. It is sent to towns and villages across Hungary. Thousands of people believe it. They stay in their homes, unprepared. The Mongols roam the countryside unopposed. After Mohi, there is no major organized force left. Hungary's defenses collapse. The Mongols spend the next 10 months systematically ravaging the country. Pest is burned to the ground. The Great Hungarian Plain is devastated. Nearly half of all inhabited places are destroyed. 1/4 of the population dies. In the lowlands, there are hardly any survivors. Archaeological evidence from 21st century excavations confirms mass destruction, coin hoards buried and never recovered, villages burned with charred bodies inside. At Kiskunmai-san, plows turn up 250 silver coins and rings. Nearby, archaeologists find the remains of a burned dwelling filled with charred bodies, mostly children. The coins date from Béla's early reign, 1235 to 1241. Same pattern at Encircled and Zonk. At Zonk, 17 women and children are found inside a house, burned down around them. They had tried to hide in the oven. At Encircled, a woman and 2 children, all failed. Some Hungarians resist, surviving nobles who did not reach Mohi in time, armed peasants, guerrilla tactics, harassing Mongol troops, occasionally engaging in open battle. Subutai responds with massacres. The resistance stalls. Roger of Torre Maggiore, Archdeacon of Varad, lives through the invasion. When the Mongols capture Varad, he flees into the forest. Then he goes to Chinad. It has already been destroyed. The Mongols capture him. He spends months as their prisoner. When the Mongols finally withdraw in 1242, Roger escapes. He climbs a tall tree to survey the land. Church towers are his waypoints. The roads have vanished. Grass and thorn bushes have taken over. He writes, "We began to walk across the waste and abandoned land that they had destroyed while retreating. The roads and paths had vanished. Grass and thorn bushes had taken over. Leeks, purslane, onions, and garlic, left in the gardens of the peasants, were, when they could be found, brought to me as the choicest delicacies. Roger goes to Rome in 1243. He receives the post of Archdeacon of Sopron. Varad is completely destroyed. He begins writing his account, Carmen Miserabile, Song of Lamentation upon the Destruction of the Kingdom of Hungary by the Tatars, an eyewitness record, published in the Scriptores Rerum Hungaricarum, Volume 2, pages 543 to 588, by the Budapest Academy in 1937. English translation by Janos Bach and Martin Rady at Central European University Press, 2010. Not a summary, not hearsay. a man who hid in forests, walked through ashes, ate wild leeks to survive. Thomas of Split writes another contemporary account. Historia Pontificum Salonitanorum atque Spalatensium. History of the bishops of Salona and Split. He interviews refugees. He speaks with survivors from Mohi. He records details of the bridge fight, the Mongol tactics, the pursuit and slaughter. Published by Rocky, ours page 171. English translation by Demir Karbich and others. Budapest, 2006. Another eyewitness source, another man who saw the refugees flood into Dalmatia. The Mongols control Hungary for almost a year. They plan to push further west, Austria, Germany, Italy. Subutai coordinates multiple armies across hundreds of kilometers. But in December 1241, Ogadai Khan dies in Mongolia. He is the great Khan, supreme ruler of the Mongol Empire. Batu Khan must return east. The princes of the blood must be present for the election of the new Khan. The Mongols withdraw. Béla returns to Hungary in 1242. What he finds is ruin, half the country destroyed, a quarter of the people dead, no army, no administration, the kingdom on the edge of collapse. Béla rebuilds. He earns the nickname the second founder of Hungary. Before 1241, Hungary had only 10 stone castles, most along the western border with Austria. By the end of Béla's reign, he oversees the construction of nearly 100 new fortresses. Stone keeps on high ground, protecting trade routes. Never again will Hungary be defenseless against steppe invaders, but the scars remain. Modern archaeology continues to uncover evidence. Arrowheads near the Sajó River consistent with Mongol design, mass graves, fortified hilltop refuges where civilians fled. Roger of Torre Maggiore describes one in Transylvania, a marvelously tall mountain with an awful rock on its top. A great many men and women fled there. Some survived, many did not. The Battle of Mohi is studied in military academies today, a textbook double envelopment. Fixing the enemy at the bridge while flanking from the south, using siege weapons as field artillery, psychological warfare with a fake retreat gap, Mongol tactics refined over decades of conquest. If you value documented warfare history and tactical analysis like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using contemporary chronicles compiled in the Scriptores Rerum Hungaricarum and translated by Central European University Press, published between 2006 and 2010, including primary sources from men who survived the invasion and recorded what they saw within 2 years of the events. Now back to the information. But here is what most histories miss. The Mongol casualties at Mohi were unusually high. Batu lost 30 of his personal bodyguards. A lieutenant named Bakatu. Chinese and Mongol sources note Batu's forces were stretched to breaking before Subutai arrived. John of Plano Carpini, a papal envoy who traveled to Mongolia in 1245 to own Suez, witnesses a large cemetery in Russia, exclusively for Mongol troops killed in the Hungarian campaign. Many lost their lives there, he is told. The Hungarian resistance did not end at Mohi. Armed peasants, nobles with private forces, guerrilla warfare. Recent archaeological research published in 2014 in the Carmen Miserabile volume, pages 69 to 80, by Kecskemetai Katona Joseph Museum, shows defensive ditches around stone churches across the Great Hungarian Plain, previously identified as burial ditches. New excavations find hundreds of weapons, human remains with battle injuries. Local peasant communities slowed the Mongol advance with scattered resistance, not enough to stop them, enough to bleed them. The Mongols never returned in force during Batu's lifetime. When a second invasion came in 1285 under Nogai and Tolabuca, Hungary was ready. Stone castles everywhere, heavily armored cavalry, scorched earth tactics. Talabuga's northern army was stopped by heavy snow in the Carpathians. Famine killed thousands of Mongol soldiers. Polish sources report an epidemic struck the invaders. They withdrew. Hungary survived. The losses at Mohi shaped Mongol strategy. Batu and Guyuk, Ogadai's son, argued after the battle. Guyuk accused Batu of incompetence, of riding Subutai's coattails to victory. Batu ejected Guyuk and his brother Buri from camp, sent them back to Karakorum with Monka as a witness. The internal politics of the Mongol Empire turned on the casualties taken in Hungary. Subutai never faced another European army. He returned east, died in 1248. Some historians call him the greatest general in history. 32 nations conquered, 65 battles won, more territory overrun than any other commander. At Mohi, at age 65, too fat to ride, he executed a perfect night river assault in double envelopment against an enemy army twice his size. Béla died in 1270. He had rebuilt Hungary from ashes, increased the proportion of heavy cavalry, hired Venetian crossbowmen. fortified the kingdom so thoroughly that when the Mongols came again, they could not hold ground. His reform saved Central Europe. But on the 11th of April, 1241, none of that had happened yet. The Hungarian army stood on the banks of the Sajó, crowded into a camp too small, facing an enemy they did not understand. By nightfall, the route west was choked with bodies. The Mongol advantage was not just numbers or tactics, it was engineering, psychological warfare, coordinated multi-front operations, deception. Subutai had planned the European campaign for over a year. Spies gathered information on Russian principalities, Poles, Hungarians. The invasion of Poland was a diversion. The real target was always Hungary. The timing was precise. Legnica fell on the 9th of April. Mohi on the 11th. 2 decisive battles, 2 days apart, over 500 kilometers distant, both coordinated by one 73-year-old general in an ox cart. The Hungarian nobles who refused to join Béla's army thought the Mongols were just raiders. Another Cuman raid? Something you buy off or chase away? They learned too late. Thomas of Split records the terror that spread across Europe after Mohi. The rhythmic sounds of approaching Mongol hordes, victory chants, waves of terror. Inhabitants of cities wondered who was marked to die and who would be spared. Under such circumstances, no one can dream of a future. Minds become stagnant, ideas wither, souls feel empty, social life becomes extinct. Pope Gregory IX called for a crusade against the Mongols. Nobody came. Gregory was feuding with Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. European powers did not unite. Béla's pleas for help went unanswered. If Ögödei had not died in December 1241, if the Mongols had not withdrawn, Europe would have faced the full weight of the largest empire in history with no coordinated defense. The numbers do not lie. The Ebtenacher Notiz reports 10,000 Hungarian dead. Thomas of Split and other sources report 60 to 65,000. Near contemporary accounts place the Hungarian army at 60,000 strong before the battle. Rashid al-Din, using Mongol records, places the entire Central European invasion force at 40,000 horsemen. At Mohi, only a portion fought, perhaps 25 to 30,000. They destroyed an army twice their size in less than a day. The tactical brilliance is studied at West Point, at Sandhurst, at military colleges worldwide. The night bridge crossing, the use of catapults as covering fire, the false retreat gap, the pursuit and annihilation of a broken enemy. Subutai created a template for modern combined arms warfare. Fix the enemy, flank, destroy their will to fight, pursue ruthlessly. But the human cost is recorded in the earth. At Mohi, archaeologists have found mass graves, arrowheads, weapon fragments, coins dropped in flight, churches fortified with ditches, villages burned with families inside. Roger of Torremaggiore walked through a country where roads had vanished under grass, where wild vegetables and abandoned gardens were the finest food available, where church towers were the only landmarks left. And yet, recent scholarship published in 2025 in the Hungarian Conservative and the Seven Swords Military History Journal shows Hungarian resistance was more effective than Western chronicles admit. After Mohi AOS, hundreds of irregulars continued fighting. Castle garrisons held out. 5 stone fortresses east of the Danube survived the invasion. The siege of the fortress of Klis nearly succeeded for the Mongols, but fighting on the walls ended only when the invaders realized Ögödei had died. The Mongols suffered losses throughout their occupation, not enough to defeat them, enough to make pacification impossible. Batu's original plan was to conquer all the way to the Atlantic. The Great Sea, Mongol sources call it. Mohi was supposed to be the beginning, not the end. The casualties, the logistical strain, the difficulty of holding ground against guerrilla resistance, all played a role in the decision to withdraw when Ögödei died. Some historians argue Batu never intended to advance further. Others point to his plans, delayed until 1255 by political turmoil, to resume the Western campaign. He died before he could. The Battle of Mohi was decisive and inconsequential. Decisive because it destroyed Hungary's ability to resist for a year. Inconsequential because the Mongols left Umbaz, and Hungary rebuilt. But for the men who stood on that field, for the families hiding in mountain refuges, for the archdeacon who spent months as a slave, for the king who fled to the Adriatic and returned to ashes, it was the end of a world. The Sajó River still flows past Mohi. In 1991, a memorial was erected, a man-made hill with wooden crosses, a symbolic cemetery for the Christians who died in 1241, 750 years later, designed by Vadas György, concentric walkways, a quiet place, but beneath the quiet, the history speaks. Archaeological teams continue to excavate. In 2014, researchers published findings in the Carmen Miserabile commemorative volume: defensive ditches, mass burials, evidence of prolonged resistance. The story is still being written. Here's the final piece, the one that reframes everything. In 2017, a team led by Joseph Laslovsky, Stephen Powell, and Beatrix Pustai published a comprehensive reconstruction of the battle in a research paper titled Reconstructing the Battle of Mohi and the Mongol Invasion of Hungary in 1241, New Archaeological and Historical Approaches. They used excavations near the Sajó River, weapon analysis, skeletal remains, coin hoards with terminal dates. The paper, presented at an international conference and published in academic journals, confirms what the chronicles described: mass death, coordinated Mongol attacks, Hungarian resistance both at Mohi and throughout the occupation, and something else. The Mongol forces were not invincible. They were stretched thin. They took heavier casualties in Hungary than in most campaigns. The withdrawal in 1242 was not just about Ogeday's death. It was about an army that had pushed too far, too fast, and met resistance it could not fully suppress. 25,000 Mongols destroyed 70,000 Hungarians at Mohi. But Hungary destroyed something in the Mongols too: the idea that they could sweep across Europe without cost. Batu never came back. When the Golden Horde tried again 44 years later, Hungary drove them out. The battle that should have opened the gates to Western Europe instead became the high watermark. The Mongols went no further. The bodies at Mohi lie in the earth. The river still runs red in the chronicles, and the lesson remains: superior tactics can destroy a larger force, but even the greatest army bleeds. The last Mongol horsemen forded the Danube in the spring of 1242. They did not leave because they were defeated. They left because their great Khan was dead, and the world's largest empire required its princes to gather and choose a successor. They left behind a kingdom of ghosts. King Béla IV returned from his Adriatic exile, not to a country, but to a graveyard. Roger of Torre Maggiore, who walked that ruined landscape, wrote of a silence so profound it was broken only by the cawing of crows feasting on the dead. Fields were not fallow. They were gone, reclaimed by weeds and brush. Roads were erased. Of the 358 villages on the Great Hungarian Plain, 358 had been destroyed. The population had been halved. In some regions, 80% of the people were gone. This was the inheritance of Mohi, not just a military defeat, but the complete unraveling of a society. But Béla, the king who fled, the man his nobles called a coward, was about to begin the most ambitious and transformative project in Hungarian history. He would become a Masodik Honalapito, the second founder of the nation. His first act was to survey the wreckage and understand the failure. The failure was not one of courage. Hungarian knights had fought bravely at the Sajó Bridge. The failure was one of strategy, of technology, of understanding the new face of war. The Mongols were not just a horde, they were a system. Béla would fight them not with valor alone, but with a system of his own. His new doctrine was simple: stone and steel. Before the invasion, the kingdom relied on earthen ramparts and wooden forts, barriers easily cleared by Mongol engineering corps. The entire kingdom had fewer than a dozen stone castles. This had to change. In 1247, Béla issued a royal decree that shattered 1,000 years of feudal tradition. He granted his nobles and even his bishops the right to build stone fortresses on their own lands without seeking royal permission. Before, such power was a royal prerogative, a right jealously guarded. Now, it was a national emergency. He offered land, titles, and tax exemptions to anyone who would raise stone walls. He abandoned the royal monopoly on defense and effectively privatized it. The result was the greatest construction boom in Central European history. Over the next 2 decades, more than 100 new stone castles rose from the Hungarian landscape. They were built on high, inaccessible crags, overlooking river valleys and strategic roads. These were not the sprawling castles of Western Europe. They were stark, functional killing grounds, designed with Mongol tactics in mind. They featured high curtain walls to defy siege engines and projecting towers to allow for flanking fire from crossbowmen. They were built to hold out, to be self-sufficient bastions that a fast-moving steppe army could not afford to spend weeks besieging. Each castle became a nail in the coffin of the open-plain warfare the Mongols had perfected. Next came the army. The lesson of Mohi was that light cavalry, even experienced Cuman horsemen, could not stand against the Mongol swarm, and heavy armored knights, while formidable, were too slow and too few. Béla needed a new kind of soldier. He began hiring thousands of mercenary crossbowmen from Italy and Germany. The crossbow was the great equalizer. It required less training than a composite bow, but could punch through Mongol leather armor at a distance. He reorganized the royal army, making heavily armored cavalry its core, but supported by large formations of disciplined crossbowmen who could lay down devastating fields of fire from behind battlefield fortifications or castle walls. He also invited the Cumans back. He understood his nobles' hatred of them, but he understood more deeply that he needed their knowledge. He settled them in the heart of the Great Plain, granting them autonomy in exchange for military service. They would be Hungary's first line of defense, a buffer of steppe warriors to meet the next wave. But castles and soldiers were useless without people. The country was empty. Béla sent envoys to Germany, to Poland, to Bohemia, inviting settlers. He offered them land and, crucially, freedom from the local nobles. These new immigrants, primarily Germans, brought with them skills in craft, trade, and farming. They rebuilt the towns, they repopulated the villages. Hungary became a more diverse, more complex kingdom. It was a painful, often violent process. The Hungarian nobles resented the newcomers. They hated the Cumans, but Béla held the fragile new society together through sheer force of will. He was forging a new Hungary in the crucible of its near destruction. While Hungary rebuilt, the Mongol Empire tore itself apart. The news of Ogeday's death had saved Europe, but it plunged the Mongols into a succession crisis that lasted for years. Batu Khan, the victor of Mohi, and his cousin Guyuk Khan were bitter rivals. At a victory feast after the Hungarian campaign, Guyuk had publicly accused Batu of incompetence, of winning only because the old general Subutai was there to guide him. The insult ran deep. Batu used his immense power as Khan of the Golden Horde to delay the election of a new great Khan. For 5 years, the empire was rudderless. When Guyuk was finally elected in 1246, his first priority was not conquering Europe, but destroying Batu. He raised an army and began marching west. The Mongol civil war that would have torn the empire in two was averted only by Guyuk's sudden death in 1248, possibly from poison. This internal strife gave Béla the one thing he needed more than stone or steel: time. Decades passed. Béla grew old and died in 1270. His reforms were carried on by his successors. The castles multiplied. The army modernized. The memory of Mohi faded into legend for some. But for the strategists of the Hungarian court, it was a lesson written in blood that was never to be forgotten. The test came in the winter of 1285, 44 years after Mohi. A new generation of Mongols, led by Nogai Khan and Talabuga, crossed the Carpathians. It was an invasion force every bit as large and dangerous as the first. Their plan was the same, a multi-pronged assault to overwhelm the kingdom's defenses. But the kingdom was not the same. When Nogai's army poured into Transylvania, they did not find open plains and terrified peasants. They found a network of interlocking stone fortresses. The cities of Regin, Brasov, and Bystritsa were now walled bastions. The Mongols, masters of the field battle, were forced into a series of grinding, costly sieges. While their main force was pinned down trying to starve out a single castle, the new Hungarian army, led by King Ladislaus IV, a man of Cuman heritage himself, known as Ladislaus the Cuman, refused to offer a decisive battle. There would be no second Mohi. Instead, Ladislaus used scorched earth tactics. As the Mongols advanced, the Hungarians burned the fields and villages, evacuated the population into the castles, and poisoned the wells. The vast Mongol herds of horses, the engine of their army, began to starve in the brutal Hungarian winter. Small, heavily armored Hungarian cavalry units, accompanied by Cuman horse archers, launched lightning raids on Mongol foraging parties. They would strike from the cover of a forest, unleash a volley of crossbow bolts, and retreat to the safety of the nearest castle before the Mongols could organize a response. Talabuga's northern army fared even worse. He tried to march through the snow-choked passes of the Carpathians, the same route Batu had taken. But this time, the passes were fortified. Local garrisons ambushed his columns, causing landslides and raining down arrows and rocks from fortified watchtowers. His army was starving and freezing before it ever reached the Hungarian plain. Famine gave way to epidemic. The Mongol army began to melt away, not from a single glorious battle, but from 1,000 cuts. From starvation, sickness, and the unyielding resistance of a prepared nation, by the spring of 1286, the invasion had collapsed. The remnants of the Mongol army staggered back across the mountains, harried every step of the way. They had not been defeated in a pitched battle. They had been consumed by the kingdom itself. Béla's system had worked. The castles had held. The army had bled the invaders. The scorched earth strategy had broken their logistical chain. Hungary had faced the horde a second time and had won. The lesson was clear. The Mongols were not invincible. They could be beaten, not by mimicking their tactics, but by negating them. The legacy of Mohi, therefore, is not the story of a defeat. It is the story of a rebirth. The battle on the Sajó River was the end of the old kingdom of Hungary, a feudal state of earthen forts and noble privilege. The ashes of that kingdom gave rise to a new one, a centralized, militarized, multi-ethnic state capable of defending itself. This new Hungary became a bulwark, a fortress kingdom that shielded the rest of Central Europe. The Mongols would never again mount a serious invasion of the country. Their high water mark was not a tide that receded on its own. It was a wave that broke against a wall of stone and steel built by a king who had learned the ultimate lesson of defeat. The crosses that stand at the Mohi Memorial today do not just mark a grave. They mark a foundation, the foundation of a kingdom that refused to die.